The wind was sharp that morning, the kind that carried the feeling of unfinished stories and forgotten places. As the sun broke through the clouds over the dusty county fairgrounds, people gathered with the kind of anticipation only small-town auctions create. Some came to sell, some to bargain, and some, like Ethan Rowe, came searching for any small thread that might help stitch together the life that had quietly fallen apart around them. Ethan stepped into the auction yard with hands calloused from work that no longer paid, carrying a hope that felt painfully thin. He had lost his father 2 months earlier, lost his job soon after, and was on the edge of losing his home. But something inside him insisted that today, of all days, something was waiting for him. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected miracles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name. Your support truly helps this community grow. Ethan didn't have much money left, but he found himself wandering toward a corner of the lot where an odd mixture of items had been piled: rusted farm tools, old trunks, broken radios, and a few wooden crates marked with numbers so faded they were almost invisible. He didn't know why he felt drawn to them, only that something tugged gently at him as if whispering that this forgotten pile carried a purpose he couldn't name yet. When the auctioneer tapped his gavel and opened the bid, almost no one paid attention. The first crate went for a few dollars, the second for even less. Then came the lot with a dusty wooden box reinforced with metal bands. No one seemed interested. Without thinking, Ethan raised his hand. A moment later, the gavel fell, and the box was his. He ran his fingers along its weathered edges. It was heavier than it looked and locked with an old latch that refused to budge. It smelled faintly of cedar and something older, like the scent of a memory buried in wood. Ethan carried it back to his truck, telling himself it was just an old box, just a piece of forgotten history he might restore and sell for a little cash. But in truth he felt a strange warmth, a feeling he hadn't felt in months: hope, quiet and unexpected. He started the engine and turned onto the gravel road. The box settled on the seat beside him. The sky above him was clear, until it wasn't. A deep thumping sound echoed through the air. The gravel beneath his tires trembled. Birds scattered from treetops. And then, like a scene from a movie he never imagined himself in, a helicopter swept over the ridge and descended directly in front of his truck, blades cutting the air with a force that shook the dust around him into a swirling haze. Ethan slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. The helicopter touched down, skids carving small trenches into the dirt. Before he could move or even breathe, 2 men in dark jackets jumped out and approached his truck with urgent eyes. One of them stepped forward, voice raised over the roar of the blades, asking a question that would unravel the quiet life Ethan thought he knew: "Where's the thing?" Ethan froze, the words hitting him like a punch. The man's expression was not angry but deeply anxious, as though something larger than either of them was at stake. But Ethan had no idea what he was talking about. He managed to say that all he had was the box he'd bought fair and square at the auction. The men exchanged looks, tense, worried, calculating. Then the taller one asked if he could open it. Ethan agreed, more confused than afraid. They pulled the box onto the ground, prying at the latch until it snapped open. Inside was nothing more than a folded tarp, a bundle of old receipts, and a small wooden carving of a bird. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth helicopters or frantic questions. The men stared in disbelief. One muttered something about being too late. Then, without another word, they packed up, returned to the helicopter, and lifted into the air, leaving Ethan standing alone with a box that suddenly felt more mysterious than it had minutes before. The wind from the helicopter's departure whipped dust around him, and in that moment he wasn't sure whether he wanted answers or to pretend the moment had never happened. But life has a way of not letting you turn away when destiny is tapping on your shoulder. Later that night, Ethan brought the box into his small house. He studied the carved bird again. It was smooth, worn by time and handling. Something about it felt strangely familiar. He remembered the stories his father used to tell about his own father, a man Ethan had known only through tales. A man who had been part of something he never explained, something Ethan always assumed were exaggerated memories from a different era. His father used to say, "Your grandfather left something important behind, something he never got the chance to finish." Ethan had brushed it off as storybook talk. But now, staring at the bird carving, he wondered. He searched the box again and found a thin slit beneath one of the boards. Inside it was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. On it were coordinates. Just numbers, nothing else. Ethan felt a tremor of curiosity, then fear. He could ignore it and try to sell the box. Pretend today never happened. But something inside him insisted that he couldn't walk away now. He felt like he was being led, step by step, into something his grandfather, and perhaps his father, had left behind for him. The next morning, Ethan packed water, a flashlight, and gloves, then entered the coordinates into his truck's GPS. The location was deep in the foothills, near an abandoned mining site no one had touched in decades. He drove for hours until the road turned into dirt, then into overgrown paths. He parked where the GPS died, grabbed his gear, and started walking. The trail grew rougher with each step, the wind whistling through the pines with a lonely, almost mournful sound. Birds scattered as he passed. Every so often, he paused, wondering what he was even doing. But then he'd feel the carving in his pocket, and his father's soft voice echoed in his memory, "Some things are meant to find you." He climbed over rocks and fallen logs until he reached a clearing where the land dipped into a narrow ravine. And there, half hidden under brush, was a metal hatch. Ethan's heart raced. The hatch had no markings except the same bird carved onto a small metal plate. His breath caught. His grandfather. It had to be. He cleared the brush away, hands shaking. The metal groaned as he pulled the hatch open, the sound echoing into the earth. A ladder led down into darkness. Ethan descended cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. At the bottom was a small underground room, empty except for a metal table, a locked cabinet, and a dusty journal resting on the floor. He picked up the journal and opened it. The first page bore his grandfather's handwriting. It told the story of a man recruited into a quiet, unnamed project during the Cold War, tasked with protecting something not dangerous but precious, something not meant for government hands or corporate greed. His grandfather had spent decades moving, hiding, preserving what he called the thing, an object that carried both beauty and burden. But as the years passed, he became unsure whom to trust. He wrote of being hunted by men who claimed to be protectors but acted like predators. He wrote of a promise, that one day his grandson, someone with a good heart and patient hands, would know what to do with it. Ethan flipped through page after page, breath shaking. The final entry ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if his grandfather had been forced to abandon the journal. But one line stood out: "If you find this, follow the bird. It will guide you." He looked around the room again. On the cabinet was another carved bird, slightly larger, its wings pointing upward. Ethan traced its shape, and the cabinet clicked open. Inside was a velvet-lined case. His heart thundered as he opened it. Inside lay a small crystalline object, clear, shimmering faintly even in the dim light. It wasn't a gem. It wasn't glass. It felt alive somehow, warm to the touch, humming with a soft vibration. Ethan stared at it, mesmerized, sensing without understanding that this was what the men in the helicopter had been searching for. His grandfather had protected it with his life. He realized then that he couldn't keep it. Whatever it wasn't meant for greed or power. It needed safety, real safety. Ethan placed it gently back in the case and closed the cabinet. As he climbed back to the surface, he saw storm clouds gathering. The air felt heavy, charged. He hurried through the forest, the object's weight on his shoulders even though he wasn't carrying it physically. When he reached his truck, he froze. A second helicopter was approaching. Not sleek and corporate like the first one, this one was older, marked with rescue insignia. It landed softly in the clearing, and